My name is Jeffrey Doles, and I'm up here in Anchorage, Alaska, chilling like a villain with the penguins and the Eskimos, hiding like a tyrant from the FBI. And I'm just about to tell you why.
Okay. Now, my understanding is you have some questions about a business we've got here in Rock Springs.
I do.
What can I do for you?
Well,
What can I try to answer for you? Anyway?
About 3 years ago, DCI did a sting on that store. They confiscated all the pipes and water pipes out of there.
Okay.
About a week later, they returned it all.
Okay.
Well, I'm from Hip Hop Hippies in Gillette, Wyoming.
Right.
I'm recently convicted in federal court of knowingly selling drug paraphernalia.
Okay.
And when that store was raided, it was because my store was raided the week before. And I was saying, you know, there's 11 other stores like this in the state of Wyoming. You can't just raid mine.
Well, let me explain something to you first off. It wasn't DCI that hit that store. It was Rock Springs PD.
Okay.
There was no affiliation with DCI. Yes, we did do it on a search warrant, and we seized quite a bit of stuff. It wasn't a week later that the stuff was returned. It was probably more along the lines of a couple months. What happened at that time was it was referred to a prosecuting attorney's office here in Rock Springs, and they were waiting. Now, you were with Head Shop Hippies, is that what it's called?
Hip Hop Hippies.
Hip Hop Hippies, okay.
Yeah.
What it was, now you're in Gillette. There was a case in Gillette, and there was also a case in Casper.
Both of them were mine.
Okay. Which one was first?
The Gillette case, and I was acquitted of all charges on that case.
Right. Okay. Now, my understanding was, and you would have to speak to our local county attorney's office to find out for sure what the what the procedure was on this, but that you were waiting to prosecute the local case to see what the results were of the Gillette case. And when you were acquitted of those charges, they determined they weren't going to follow through with the case here in Rock Springs, and that's when the stuff was returned to the business owner here in Rock Springs.
And that has to be one of the most frustrating aspects of all of it, because literally the Rock Springs store reaps the rewards of me being acquitted of the charges. As if there weren't enough ironic twists in this sad story of mine to begin with, here we go with another one. Because to truly understand the magnitude of lost liberties in all of this, you've got to hear all of its incredibly ironic twists. This one begins on the heels of the criminal county court jury finding me not guilty of possession of drug paraphernalia. Because believe it or not, while the state of Wyoming was dismissing similar charges against the Rose Petal store owner in Rock Springs, Wyoming, and returning their pipes as a result of my acquittal, I was being forced to petition the judge in my case to force the state of Wyoming to return the 330 that they had confiscated from me. I had already reopened Hip Hop Hippies and incorporated it into the state of Wyoming because I was under the erroneous assumption that a jury finding me not guilty of being in possession of drug paraphernalia really meant that I was not guilty of being in possession of drug paraphernalia, and figured that since the state of Wyoming had dismissed charges against the Rose Petal in Rock Springs, Wyoming, and returned their pipes, that there wasn't any bona fide reason for the county attorney's office in Gillette, Wyoming to continue possessing mine. And I truly believe to this day that they most likely should have done so without forcing me to go through the changes of filing a motion to begin with. In the meantime, the county attorney's office had filed a counter motion in which they had requested a time continuance so that they could prepare what's known as a civil forfeiture against me, which is a lawsuit designed to have a lower civil court judge overrule the jury's not guilty verdict by having him say that the pipes are in fact drug paraphernalia so that they could have them destroyed. The county attorney's office, in its attempt to elude my allegations of malicious and vindictive prosecution, justified the civil forfeiture of my property by implying that the jury didn't specifically say the pipes in and of themselves were not drug paraphernalia, and asked the judge to embrace the ridiculous idea that the jury merely said that I was not guilty of being in possession of drug paraphernalia, not that the items themselves were not drug paraphernalia, simultaneously inviting themselves to another bite of the apple by suing me for the right to destroy my pipes, in which are the subject of the not guilty verdict in the first place. Not only did my attorney not argue against the prosecution's ridiculous request for a continuance, he didn't even object to them doing so. And since my right to be present at all critical stages of the proceedings had been involuntarily waived, and this hearing was being held behind my back in the judge's chambers without my knowledge, I had no clue as to what the prosecution was requesting, and subsequently was robbed of any opportunity to raise the objection myself. Accordingly, the time continuance was granted, effectively setting aside the county court jury's verdict of not guilty and paving the state of Wyoming's road to a direct appeal and unconstitutional appeal to a lower court judge who otherwise had absolutely no jurisdiction over it.
Scumbag lawyers with agendas. I tell you, sometimes people, I don't know what's worse. Natural disasters, all these wolves in sheep clothes pastors. Now, goddamn it, I'm scared to send my children to church.
When the civil trial came to pass, a large amount of demonstrators filled the front porch of the courthouse. They were there with picket signs that had been made out of an enlarged newspaper article from the front page of Gillette, Wyoming's News Record, headlining the fact that the jury had rendered a not guilty verdict and determined that the paraphernalia wasn't meant for drug use. They believed that the civil forfeiture proceeding was the equivalent of a prosecutorial appeal in which the state of Wyoming unequivocally did not have the right to file, and were not buying into the hypocrisy of a retrial, nor were they willing to passively sit back and allow the state of Wyoming to molest my constitutionally guaranteed Fifth Amendment right to not be put twice in jeopardy for the same offense. They knew that acquiring an acquittal on the charges like I had done would have required the jury to believe that the pipes I was admittedly in possession of did not fit the legal definition of drug paraphernalia as outlined in the Wyoming state statute. I think they also knew that there was absolutely no foundation for the allegation to begin with. In spite of what the state or federal government might like you to believe, the fact of the matter is that the only logical conclusion one could draw from the not guilty verdict in my first trial, emphasis on my first trial, is that the jury realized the pipes could be used for multiple purposes, and that accountability in its entirety for illegal usage must rest on the shoulders of the consumer rather than the head of the vendor, and rightly rejected the prosecution's theory that I was selling pipes designed as tools for the sole purpose of consuming marijuana by finding me not guilty of possession of drug paraphernalia. And the state of Wyoming, in conjunction with or cahoots with the federal government, had no right to toy with it or alter it or change it under any circumstances in any shape, form, or fashion, and to suggest otherwise smacks with vindictiveness. If they weren't willing to accept the jury's verdict, then they shouldn't have sought it in the first place. In the kangaroo court retrial, the standard of proof was lowered from beyond a reasonable doubt to a preponderance of the evidence, and my right to a fair trial was limited to the bench. Meaning that in civil court you don't have the right to a jury trial, it all comes down to what the judge decides. And in my case, the judge decided that the jury was wrong and ordered the county attorney's office to make arrangements for the destruction of my pipes because they are in fact drug paraphernalia. 30 minutes after the civil trial ended, authorities re-entered my store armed with a brand new search warrant and confiscated 2,500 more pipes, effectively shutting down my store again, and then had me indicted on the exact same charge by a federal grand jury in the United States District Court, where I was found guilty of the same crime I've already been found not guilty of. And then sentenced me to serve 3 years in the federal penitentiary as a result of it all. No one is bound to obey an unconstitutional law, and no court is bound to enforce it. If you want to know more about why I'm on the run from the FBI, go to www.myspace.com/HipHopHippiesInc, HIPHOPHIPPIESINC, and see.